You're making a mistake!
Get out there! Shut up!
I'm a businessman. I'm a businessman.
Put your hands back here! You're rubbing in!
Seven asshole!
I'll blow your head off! U.S. Secret Service. I'm arresting this guy for counterfeiting.
Freeze! Who are you?
Secret Service.
I just came in to take a leak.
To Live and Die in LA is a 1985 action crime thriller that's written and directed by William Friedkin. So To Live and Die in LA is actually a $50 patron request from a new patron that goes by the name of the Oncoming Storm. So the Oncoming Storm is actually a longtime subscriber and a longtime supporter of the channel. I wouldn't be surprised if he's been following this channel for 3 or 4 years at this point. So I can't thank this guy enough for supporting my channel for so many years and now becoming an actual patron of mine. It really means a lot to me, and I promise you, every ounce of your support is highly appreciated. So when the Oncoming Storm told me that he wanted me to watch and review To Live and Die in LA, I was completely honest, and I told him that I had never heard of this film in my entire life. And he told me that Willem Dafoe was in this film, and also that William Friedkin wrote and directed it. And I was surprised that I'd never heard of it, but I'm not alone. I think this film is overlooked and brushed under the rug. And that's pretty damn disappointing to me because I found this film to be incredibly fun and entertaining throughout its runtime. Obviously, I don't think it's a perfect film or anything like that, but it's a really great action film and also a buddy cop detective movie. And I know that's a concept that's been done to death, but I think this film handles it incredibly well. But before I really dive more into the film, I will say I'm not really that cultured into William Friedkin's work. I've only seen The Exorcist and Killer Joe before this. Obviously, I like both films, even though Killer Joe is insane and has one of the most out there and depraved third acts that I've ever seen. I actually like that film quite a bit. And obviously, The Exorcist is one of the best horror films ever made. It's incredibly iconic and influential. And I know I've never seen The French Connection. I know that's another really popular film that is considered an all-time classic that people really love. I promise to eventually watch that film whenever that happens. But I've actually had my eye on Sorcerer because I heard Sorcerer is essentially a remake of The Wages of Fear. And I really love The Wages of Fear. And I heard that Sorcerer actually gives the original film a run for its money, and it's a pretty damn solid remake. But either way, despite me not being that knowledgeable or experienced in his work, I still really enjoyed To Live and Die in LA. This is a movie that is so incredibly 80s. Honestly, probably the most 80s movie that I've ever seen in my entire life. And usually, that's something that I don't particularly like. And it's mostly because it'll make the film come off dated and cheesy, and therefore making it difficult to immerse myself in. But here with this film, I think the 80s atmosphere and the 80s soundtrack and the overall approach to the film actually works pretty well. And I think it's hugely because of the fact that it's so consistent with that choice throughout the entire film. This is a film that is incredibly unforgivable with its stylistic approach. The 80s band Wang Chung actually composed the soundtrack to this film, and it's a huge reason why this film consistently has this kind of new wave, synth wave type of bop throughout the entire film. And it does make it really cool and fun to watch throughout your experience. But another thing about this film that I really enjoyed, and I feel like works really well here, is that it feels genuinely gritty and suspenseful. A lot of the fighting and a lot of the physical contact in this film feels like legitimately dangerous. There's a lot of parts where I'm like, damn, they are really going at it. And there's this one scene where the main character, played by William Peterson, is desperately trying to open up a locked briefcase, and he just constantly slams it against the wall what seems like a billion times. And the shot and the take never cuts. And it's just scenes like that I feel like does contribute to its authenticity and does make it feel more gritty and more realistic. And the violence in this film is pretty damn brutal as well. There's a number of gunshots to the head in this film that have still not left my mind. Really, the action in this film in general is pretty damn incredible. And at first, I didn't think I was going to be all into it in that aspect because the opening action suspense sequence, if you will, that has to do with the suicide bomber, I actually wasn't that into. It just came off a bit comical and really unrealistic. But honestly, I don't think that paints the actual picture of what you're going to experience throughout the entire film, because a lot of the action happens after that, even though it's a bit over the top and crazy. The execution of it feels genuinely suspenseful. And there's a car chase sequence in this film that is honestly probably one of the best car chase sequences I've ever seen in my entire life. It's incredibly intense from start to finish, and the direction it goes in is so daring, not only from a character decision standpoint or just from a plot standpoint, but just from a filmmaking standpoint. I can only imagine the amount of choreography and the amount of stunt work that it took to pull something like this off. And the Oncoming Storm told me himself that the car chase sequence alone took over 6 weeks to film. And I can believe it just from watching it, because the entire sequence is just balls to the walls insanity. But another reason why I think the suspense does work so well in this film is because you do feel genuine stakes here. This film is so chaotic and, so uncaring about what happens to certain characters that you really do feel that even the main character in a lot of different ways and all the side characters that revolve around the central conflict are in jeopardy. Throughout this entire film, you do feel like at any moment of conflict, something terrible could happen to one of the characters that you've been following for a while. And I do feel like that's another thing that does elevate those action sequences and makes them that much more suspenseful and compelling. And I also think in general that the characters in this film are very well written and well acted. The main character played by William Peterson, I think he gives a pretty damn solid performance. And his character is an interesting one because he's not a crooked cop, but he's certainly not an ethical cop either. He goes way too far in the weeds and does a lot of things that are just downright immoral and unethical. He jeopardizes a lot of people's lives, and it really does make you question which character is really more unethical, the cop character that he plays or the criminal that's played by Willem Dafoe, which, by the way, he is incredible in this film. And honestly, this character is probably in my top 5 Willem Dafoe characters. I really can't stress it enough. I think he's really great in this film. John Turturro is also in this film, and that caught me by surprise. But he's not in this film that much, to be honest with you. But when he's in it, he's obviously great, which is a surprise to nobody. And again, playing this really on edge and paranoid criminal. But there are a few things about this film that I simply couldn't get behind. As I mentioned, this film is very 80s. And with that comes some stereotypical and cliched dialogue that I just couldn't get into. There's stuff that is just so cheesy and lazy, in my opinion, in terms of what characters say to each other. There's plenty of one-liners in this film, mostly in the first half, to be fair with you, because the second half of this film is almost flawless, but I'll get to that later. But there's plenty of moments in the first half of this film where you kind of have these one-liner bits of dialogue that it was just kind of an eye roll. And also, even though I really liked the 80s music throughout this film, there are moments where it was too stereotypical. And again, kind of like the dialogue, just couldn't kid myself and I couldn't get behind. And even though I think the second half of this film is quite incredible, the ending itself, like the last 5 minutes or so of this film, just goes too far with the cheesy 80s thing. It's like something out of a crappy, cheesy 80s TV cop show. I think the film would have been a lot better if it had an ending that didn't really try too hard and ended on a more subtle note. Because what happens to Willem Dafoe's character in the third act of the film that entire scene that has to do with this huge fire was really awesome. And I feel like that scene itself wrapped a lot of things up, and we didn't really need that much more afterwards. But overall, I do think that this is a pretty kick-ass movie, and I do think it is quite shameful that a lot of people don't know about this film, and it's incredibly difficult to access. I mean, the only way you can really watch this movie is if you order a physical copy of a release, or you watch it illegally. Those are the only ways to watch this film, because it's not available on any streaming platform. But overall, I'm really glad that I watched this film. I had a lot of fun with it. I'll probably end up buying the film because this is a film that I do consider to be pretty damn rewatchable. So I'm going to give To Live and Die in LA a soft 8 out of 10. For a while, I was teetering between a strong 7 and a soft 8. But I really had an excellent time with this film. It was a whole lot of fun. And it does a lot of things right. Much more things right than it does wrong. And I do think it does deserve a lot more exposure. And I'm glad that the Oncoming Storm gave me the opportunity to give a film like this much more needed exposure. So if you haven't heard of this film or seen it, I highly recommend checking it out. I can't promise that you'll be in love with it or that you'll like it as much as I do, but I do think that it is worth your time. But anyways, that's all I gotta say about To Live and Die in LA. If you really enjoyed what I had to say about the film, just give it a thumbs up and share it amongst your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be updated on more film-related content.